Hey guys, this is Sam from Ready, Set, Go. Hope you guys are having a great day. Welcome to the video. Glad to have you guys on board. So today, just wanted to go over Trello. So Trello is essentially a product planning tool, product development tool that's used by product managers, developers, database guys, anyone that's kind of involved in speccing out developing a web application or a software tool. A lot of people do use Pivotal Tracker, but I would like to put a big shout out there for Trello. If you haven't used it yet, I 100% recommend you give it a shot. It makes it a little bit more user friendly. It's a lot cleaner of a method. It's not less complicated. Anyone can log in and kind of get a feel for how it should work within a couple days of playing around with it. So my goal today is not to show you specific features of Trello, but kind of go over a process or workflow for getting one aspect of a feature out to production within your web application. A lot of people don't really optimize their workflow, which leads to inefficiencies, end up going back and having to rework things, make sure that everything fits together. So ensuring that upfront you invest a little bit of time into optimizing this part of the process and be much better off, and you'll save a lot of hours and stress down the road. So the way we use Trello, at least the way I've used Trello, is there are two boards. We have a planning board and a development board, which you can see by clicking boards in the top left hand corner. The development board let's start with the planning board. The planning board is this. Essentially, you would create 4 lists. The ones we use are ideas, specs, where you kind of write out the specifications, review, where your entire team, including the engineers, the development team, would sit down, kind of go over whether you're missing any aspects of this, whether it'd be hard to implement, and whether this is a high enough priority to move forward with. Then once the team has okayed whatever's in the review list, you'd move it on over to Reddy. And the Reddy list is essentially where that specific feature or aspect of the application is ready to be coded and put into implementation, tested, quality control, and then eventually go out to the live web application. So I'm going to start with an idea. When you're first developing a web app, usually it's common these days to have a Google OAuth or a login process where you use their Google credentials to grant them access to your application. Let's say the product team decided that this was of high value this week and we wanted to go ahead and work on that. Well, we'd move over to spec. In the spec column, we'd actually go into the card and kind of review what we need to tell the developers so that we get every single piece of that feature covered. Obviously, this isn't very well built out. Kind of threw this together just to give you an idea of what you'd include in there. User will be able to OAuth into the app using their Google account, and a list underneath the requirements kind of gives the engineers a list of things that we need to save and in the database for future use. So having gone after that, after having spec'd that out, we move it over to review. Here we'd review it with the rest of our team and then move it on over to Reddy. Once it's in Reddy, for that week, we would actually pick a few, we want to make sure this list is usually fairly lengthy. We want to have stuff ready for the engineers to code at all times. No downtime, no gaps in the workflow, so that we're constantly pumping out new features and getting them to our customers. So once we feel that this is high enough priority to get into code and move it on over, we would send it to the development board. So going over to the development board now. Once you're on the development board, it shows up on Next Up. Essentially, this gives the engineers a queue from which they can pick different tasks they want to work on. So at any given point, an engineer should be working on one specific feature or one specific card. So when an engineer is ready to work on the Google OAuth, they move it over to In Progress, go in, add themselves as a member, stating that they are working on it. As you can see, it kind of puts that in the activity feed for future reference. If someone needs to go back and, hey, I have a question about the Google OAuth feature, they know exactly who to go and talk to. So once the engineer has finished coding that for at least QA, quality control testing, they'd move it on over to staging. And staging, it's essentially in the staging database. Usually you guys would transfer a production database over to staging, so you're working with real data. But once it is in staging, your product team or whoever came up with the specifications for this feature would go in and, sorry, missed something, but the engineer, as they are coding these, they would check off these requirements as they finish them. So the product team, once it is in staging, would then go in and test out the staging environment to make sure that all of these requirements are fully implemented into the application. Once that is good to go, if it's not good to go, essentially the product team would move it back to in progress, maybe write a little comment at the bottom saying, hey, go check this out. Post it for him, and the engineer would then know what the problem was and how to fix it again and move it back to staging. So once it's fully past the quality control portion of staging, it is ready for live. At this point, the engineers or developers would prep it to be pushed out to production, where it would be fully accessible by your customers. And that's essentially the workflow that we use. Once it is live, you would move it over to live. And yeah, that's essentially the workflow we use for Trello. It's as you can see, it's fairly intuitive. There's a number of other lists that you could add back on the planning board if you, let's say, you needed a design element to one of your features. You could add it right after spec, pass it off to your graphic designer, let her own that list. Any card that falls within there is her responsibility to take care of and move it on over to review. So there's a variety of combinations, a variety of different ways you can use this tool. This is me personally. This is what I found to be really efficient. Don't like to have too many lists. Like to have it fit nicely on one screen so we're not constantly scrolling left and right. And yeah, even on a different level, each individual member of your team, I highly recommend each individual member of your team gets a personal board. Here, they could essentially write tasks to themselves. It's essentially a list manager, something like Wonderlust or Evernote. But the great part about it is you can easily create cards in Trello, video for YouTube. And then once it's in the doing column, you can actually go in, attach various things, maybe a document from Google Drive or a link to certain websites that you're using in your research, any such thing like that. So kind of makes it easy to keep everything in one place, and then you also keep track of where your various projects are in their life cycle. Once it's done, you can go in, archive the card, and it's no longer on your board. It's essentially complete, but at the same time, you can perform a search, bring up all your notes regarding that project. So yeah, again, Trello is a great tool. Even if you're not in the product or development side, I would suggest using it for literally any sort of project that you have, even if it's personal, there's no other team members involved. Keeps you very organized, keeps it straightforward, and makes sure that different things get done at the right time. So well, thank you guys for watching. Again, if you have any questions, please leave me a comment. I'll try my best to respond. If you can't find me on YouTube, always check out my blog at reddysetgo.com. Reddy, R-E-D-D-Y, just like my last name, setgo.com. I'll always be on there and be happy to respond to any questions or insight that you guys have into how you use Trello for your own projects. Great. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys have a great day. See you next time.